and welcome. We are the Bench Mob, back again for our second episode. Hi guys.
How's it going, Scrubs?
Nice to meet you all again.
How's it going, everybody?
We're doing well. Just living life. It's been almost just about a week since our last podcast, and boy, we have a lot of things to discuss today. First off, we'd like to start off with the just a nice little discussion about last night's Heat Pacers game. "Quote unquote," the Beasts of the East, according to ESPN and their promotions.
They clearly have not.
That was the hashtag.
The hashtag.
They clearly have not seen the New Jersey Nets play. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets play this season. Well, I wish they were still in New Jersey, so I could make fun of them.
You could say that definitely. That game was definitely one of the better ones of the season. And guys, any thoughts? Any reactions? Initial reactions?
Just this is unrelated, but speaking of the Brooklyn Nets, their mascot is literally Daft Punk. If you don't believe me, look up a picture.
Oh, it's weird.
Marcus Barrell and I have seen it in person, and it was
shout out to Marcus Barrell.
Now on to the important NBA news. This game was pivotal for both teams because now Indiana is up by 3 games with only 10 games to go for the Pacers, 11 for the Heat, and that's obviously a critical development. They also have the tiebreaker for the season, and in a series that's over the last 2 years when these teams have played, or it could be 2.5, the record is 7-6 in Indiana's favor. So for two teams that are so equal, having that Game 7 at home for Indiana is such a big deal. And it was a really fluky ending in a lot of ways. Obviously, neither team played particularly well on offense, but LeBron had that big flagrant foul against Roy Hibbert that he later said only a kung fu master could have done intentionally. So that was fascinating. Then also there was a Dwayne Wade three-pointer that was disallowed when on the replay it showed that he wasn't out of bounds. And there were just so many plays towards the end of the game, like David West hitting that big three in the final 2 minutes where he traveled on the play, as Jeff Van Gundy pointed out. He took like a clear 2 steps back and then hit the three. So if a couple of calls
I don't think there's really any position to be criticizing NBA officials even more than they already have been, because we all know that officiating...
I'm not even criticizing officials. I'm just saying there are so many 50-50 calls that went one way or the other that could end up shaping the season if it does come down to that Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals like we've all thought for so long.
What about you, Mr. Prime?
Well, really, I thought the game was overhyped entirely. I mean, I just thought that the Pacers are going to maintain their lead above the Heat, and like standings-wise, win or lose that game, it would have been like a 1-game difference, and I think they would have been able to maintain the lead by the end of the year.
Yeah,
so 1 game, but don't forget, if Miami had won this game, they would have the tiebreaker. So that it's 1 game for Indiana to win, or 1 game for Miami to win. So
right,
I think that's a fact.
But I think we really need to talk about the scoring disparity for the Heat. LeBron James had 38. And Dwayne Wade had 15. No other player had more than 8 points.
Do you guys have a problem with LeBron not taking that last shot? I personally thought it was a really well drawn up play, and Chris Bosh got a wide open jumper.
It was very funny because the previous play right before that, he hit the 3-pointer to bring the game close from the spot, just 2 steps behind where he had the final shot, but for some reason he airballed.
Well, Jeff Van Gundy said it. He didn't have time to take the first time he pump faked. Then took a separation dribble, and then and he obviously needs that left-handed dribble to get in rhythm on that shot. He wasn't able to do that. Airballed it.
Yeah, I think LeBron should always be the target for any last.
Well, I thought he was a great decoy in that set. Obviously, John just said it. Chris Bosh was confident. He just hit a big shot, and they got him a very good shot considering they're going against one of the best defenses in the NBA with a little over a second to set up a good inbound play. I thought I can't complain if I'm Eric Spoelstra, and that's the shot I got.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, if your team has a player like LeBron James on the team, that should always be. I think
he's the number 1 option on the decoy.
I think the number 2 option on that play should have been Dwayne Wade, because if Dwayne Wade was the Heat's best player before LeBron James and Chris Bosh came along, so why wouldn't Dwayne?
Don't forget, Wade was out of the game with that hamstring injury. I'm pretty sure he wasn't on the floor.
My bad.
That was another factor.
He only played 32 minutes.
And also, quickly for Indiana, they've been struggling for a while, and in the beginning of those struggles, they traded away their team leader, Danny Granger. A lot of people thought that was a big factor. Then they got in that trade Evan the Villain Turner, who wasn't really, that's a Mark Titus nickname, by the way, who wasn't really all that effective for them, and he's been inconsistent scoring, maybe because of the minutes.
Last night he hit 2 clutch
That's where I was leading with that long-winded introduction.
It's okay.
Sure.
And anyways, with that, also just one final note on Lance Stevenson being ejected. I feel like he's definitely, a year ago he was at the end of the bench, and people didn't even know who he was. And,
Well, no, last year he was in the rotation.
He was in the
started
rotation,
last year.
but he's made such a dramatic improvement.
He's a much better player.
But I feel like David West made the comment today that he needs to mature and quote unquote put his big boy pants on, and I definitely think that as Stevenson continues
I think
to
he meant
progress
big
as a player,
dinosaur.
Big dinosaur pants.
Second most dinosaur player in that game after Chris Bosh.
Maybe, yeah. Well, yeah. The way he was
Only that game.
the way he was staring
Only
at
that game.
Dwayne Wade, yeah,
Normally
he
first.
definitely looked. I feel like But anyways, I think Lance will continue to improve.
Very
And
cool.
speak.
No.
I want to have a quick comment on Lance Stevenson. Bill Simmons made a really good point. It seems like he's been almost too enamored with his own star power at this point, putting up like wild threes and occasionally showing a little overconfidence on the fast break, which is I think part of what makes him so good. But at the same time, you don't want him demanding the ball in like key playoff situations when you have a guy like Paul George on your team.
Although Paul George got a little carried away last night. He forced some shots with LeBron guarding him that he probably should not have taken.
It was a little bit of hero ball, and he's been playing bad the last few weeks, so maybe that was his way of kind of trying to respond to the criticism. But he did have that great blow by of LeBron in a dunk, so he did have a signature moment in that game.
Earlier, just one more thing about Paul George. Earlier in the week, I happened to watch an episode or a little segment of ESPN First Take, and Stephen A. Smith made a good point that Paul George has been going through some personal issues, and now, but by seeing the way that the Pacers have struggled, they have definitely affected his basketball game and his psyche. I feel like he needs to sit down with someone and just get his thoughts in order and his priorities straight, so that he can refocus for the playoffs, because they'll definitely need his leadership.
I almost like both teams struggling a little bit now because you don't want to peak too early. And last year I really thought that was going to happen with Miami when they went on that 27-game winning streak, and they ended the season something like 37-2. I didn't think they'd have anything left for the playoffs. They defied my expectations. But I think now it's almost like they've turned off the intensity for a little bit, and now they're going to have that for the playoffs. And I think in their heart of hearts, they knew they could afford to do that because no one in the East is catching Indiana or Miami. And since both teams were struggling, it's almost like they acknowledge, look, let's take a couple weeks. This is like deep in. I'm going deep here. This is in their subconscious, but they're like, look, let's take a couple of weeks kind of off, go 95% instead of 100%, and just have everything intact for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he need to play the whole year though.
Yeah. You're totally, but then they're talented enough that they could still have one of the top 5 records in the NBA while doing that.
All right, folks, and now we're going to segue into a little segment we would like to call Under or Overrated. I'm going to name 3 players, and I will let these 3 gentlemen in the room give their thoughts on whether the player is underrated or overrated. And we're going to start with the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers, actually, with Chris Bosh. Thoughts, guys? Go at it.
Chris Bosh, I think, is both underrated and overrated.
It's such a cop-out.
No. Hear me out here.
Sure.
All right. In terms of a big 3 scenario, it's really not a big. If you put Chris Bosh with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, he is overrated. But in that, people never give him the credit he deserves for being the player that he is because of the pedestal that people put him on. Chris Bosh, as his own player, I think is underrated in the NBA.
I think I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think even in the context of the big 3, he's a little underrated because people forget just how good he was with Toronto. He had a couple of 22 and 11 rebound seasons, led them to a 3 seed, is far and away the best guy on that team. And he's still shown when those 2 guys are out, he can really have some incredible shooting nights. He's a little inconsistent, and it almost seems like he doesn't have quite the same intensity, knowing he doesn't have to carry a team night to night, but he's hit so many big shots over the year. I think all in all, he's a little underrated.
Yeah, I think he's overrated, as a matter of fact. He didn't really play too great last night in particular, and he doesn't play all the minutes that he used to be able to. He didn't even get over 20 minutes last night, I don't think. And as a player, I think he's pretty much on the decline at this point in his career. And I don't know. People are talking about maybe after this big 3s thing separating, him going to try to make his own thing again, like he did in Toronto. I think expectations for that are too high.
I think
he can be his own star.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think only a very not so competitive Eastern Conference allowed him to be his own star, but I think he could be the second best player on a very, very good team.
Well, I think he's going back into an Eastern Conference that is worse than when he was the star of Toronto.
Yeah, that's true. So if he switches teams, I think he's good enough that he could lead a top 6 seed, I'd say. Where are we putting him? If you want to put a hypothetical, if you put him on the Charlotte Hornets, right? Because that's what they're going to be next year, the Charlotte Hornets. Yep. I think they'd be a 4 seed this season.
What if he goes back to Toronto? Yeah. Where do you put him?
Toronto, I think they'd be the 3 seed.
Yeah.
They've been really good this year, even without him. So.
They've needed an inside presence as well, and I think he would fit.
Jonas Valanciunas has been pretty good over the last couple of weeks.
I meant to compliment, of course, the big Jonas fan. And now we'll move on to our next player here. On the other side, Chris Bosh's opponent last night, David West. Under or overrated?
Mr. West is in the building.
Well, right now I'm all high on David West because of that clutch 3. I'm all about clutch players. And
Clutch travels.
He was whatever it may have been. He pulled it off. He hit the 3 last night when Chris Bosh didn't, and that's why he is underrated. He's better than people say, and Chris Bosh is less so.
Yeah, David West has gone through an interesting career in terms of where people put him on underrated and overrated lists. Because when he was teamed up with Chris Paul, Peja Stojakovic,
Tyson Chandler.
and Tyson Chandler,
The
in New
rotting
Orleans-
corpse of Peja Stojakovic.
Well, he
Unfortunately.
can still shoot.
One of my all-time favorite players. He came back. This is again off top. He came back in those Dallas playoffs and had a couple great games.
But when he was on that team, people put him really high up, and then once the magic wore off with those teams, people started putting him on as overrated.
By the magic wearing off, you mean Chris Paul saying, "I'm getting the hell out of here."
Well, Chris Paul deciding that he didn't like New Orleans anymore.
Oh, is LA nice this time of year? Every time of year? I guess I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, and then when he was the guy on those teams, he just isn't a guy that can carry a team. So he was put on an overrated list. Now, as a very good compliment on this Indiana team, I think he's an underrated player because of what people have seen from him in the past. I think he's underrated.
Excuse my use of an overused cliche, but he's the rock of that Indiana Pacers team. He's the guy, like, everyone on the team is tough and plays defense. He's the guy who's, like, real tough. He's a guy you wouldn't want to meet. As Bill Simmons says, a back alley guy. Also has a very nice jump shot. He's expanded his range to fit in with that Indiana offense. Tough rebounder, tough defender. Just all in all a winner.
Thank you, Bill Simmons Jr.
Cliche is Cam calls me Zach Lowe.
Interesting note. Interesting note here when Paul George, guys like Paul George, Lance Stevenson, and Roy Hibbert, who are the 3 main options on the Indiana Pacers, as well as George Hill. David West, when all 4 of those guys are having bad nights or just aren't in the game, David West is the guy that Frank Vogel goes to for either interior scoring, banging down low, or shooting the jump shot 15 to 18 foot like you just mentioned, Gavin. So I really think that he's one of the keys to their success in the playoffs. If he can continue this level of intensity, it'll be the Eastern Conference Finals is going to be quite the show, gentlemen. And now we will move on to our final player who isn't an Indiana Pacer or a Miami Heat player, Kawhi Leonard of the San Antonio Spurs. Switching conferences here. Thoughts, guys?
That's a tough one. Kawhi Leonard has a great skill set. Coming into the league, he was not as highly touted as a lot of Spurs draftees are.
Yeah.
So I honestly think he's rated pretty much where he should be right now. Mm-hmm. He's still developing at this point, so I think he can become a very good player. Right now, he's a good player and a very good complement to what the Spurs have going on. Right now, I can't say either under or over. I think he's right where he should be.
I agree. I think I'm going to take the middle ground, much like Tonis did. He was a guy who I expected to come in and, frankly, become a superstar this season. After how he competed in those NBA Finals, at times he was like the only one who was really effective for the Spurs, especially in that Game 6 overtime when the Spurs blew that 5-point lead. He came out and just continued to attack the rim. He scored something like 9 out of their 13 points this season. Mm-hmm. Really good stat on him. When Kawhi plays, the Spurs are 46-9 on the year. So Tyler Prime is telling me he had the same statistic. I'm like, well, all right, that's you can say it too. But anyway, Leonard's a guy who I expected to be a little bit better than he has been this season. But a lot of that is just the matchups. Greg Popovich has experimented with using him off the bench. He hasn't been able to play that small ball power forward where he was so effective in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can get back to that and they play the Heat again. If he can get back to that same level he played at last year, because at that point he's a borderline all-star.
Yeah.
I'm going to sort of agree with Tonis in that he's rated right where he should be, but once guys like Tony Parker and Tim Duncan have retired and Manu Ginobili and Greg Popovich officially, quote-unquote, hands the keys over to Kawhi to lead the franchise into the future, that's when I feel like he'll break out of his shell, because he's produced similar numbers this season as compared to last season because guys like Tony Parker and Tim Duncan have long continue to have long careers and to maintain their health in a way that allows them to continue to be effective. I think last night Tim Duncan put up another great stat line against the Denver Nuggets. So with guys like that, the pressure's off Kawhi to excel, but I feel like when his time comes, he's definitely going to be top 3 as small forward, one of the top 3 small forwards in the league. I'm going to make that claim. Right behind KD and LeBron.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm going to agree with the guys and say like his rating is about where it should be. Maybe he's a little underrated, if anything. So like Bambi was saying, Gavin was saying, he's a scrub all the same. Bambi, Gavin, whatever it may be. So yeah, they were playing over 800 basketball with him there, and when he wasn't there, they were 8-6 over 14 games, which I mean is plus basketball, but that's the Spurs way. They're going to win games, but like not nearly the same as they are with him. The guy's 22 years old. He's the youth that the aging Spurs need. It's going to be a nice transition for the next class of Spurs through Leonard, I think.
All right, guys, and now with that, we're going to go into just an interesting topic here that Gavin posed to us earlier today concerning the 76ers, the NBA's the team that is currently on a very long losing streak. I almost said I apologize for that.
You know, Milwaukee still has a worse record than them, even though they lost 26 in a row. What are you doing, Milwaukee? Milwaukee was trying to be good this year.
Yeah, that's what's really
quite the sad statistic.
Is John Hammond drunk? What?
Bring back Michael Redd.
He would start for them.
Bring back Luke Ridnour.
I think he's there.
Bring back Lou Alcindor.
Did they trade him?
Yeah, he's in Charlotte.
Oh. Sorry, Luke Ridnour. Luke Ridnour gets screwed over. He had a good situation in Seattle.
Anyways, the question that Gavin posed to us is, will the 76ers lose out for the rest of the season? How many games do we have left, guys?
We're at 26, and they have, I believe, 9 remaining. I'll confirm that in a second.
But I personally feel like the 76ers...
The 76ers have 11 games left.
They have 11 games left. I would like to think that they would somehow manage to win, considering that they've beaten teams like Miami at the very beginning of the year, and they were actually on a good roll very early into the season, but then it all came crashing down.
And now Hollis Thompson is playing serious minutes for them.
Exactly.
Sorry, Hollis Thompson, for laughing that you're playing serious minutes.
They're playing okay. So
I'm just thinking with the
winning. Here's why.
What?
They played the Celtics twice. One of them at home.
God,
Jonas shed a single tear. They have Celtics twice. They have Charlotte at home. They have in Toronto, which I think, despite Toronto's resurgence, somewhat winnable. Detroit at home, and a Miami team on the last day of the season that might be resting.
I was about to say, if they win a game, it's going to be Wednesday, April 16th at Miami. Miami is not going to play any good players. Maybe Mario Chalmers will start this game.
Oh, maybe we'll get a James Jones sighting.
If the Sixers win a game, it is against Miami's guys that will not see the floor for a second during the postseason.
I will also think
Michael Beasley.
I also think it'll be a poetic justice, like
wrote it in a song.
Beating the Heat in the first game of their season, and hopefully beating them in the very last game.
A glimmer of hope for that 76ers.
That being said, the Sixers could lose this game by 50.
If one of the Heat's big three decides,
it's either win a close game or lose by 50.
I think what's going to end up happening is it's even against a team like the 76ers, it's hard to beat the same team twice in a short time frame. I think they win 1 of 4 in the 2 Charlotte and 2 Boston games.
Okay,
if the Celtics are the one team that the Sixers can beat this year, that is a ruined. As bad as this season has been, it's just got that much worse.
I think Brad Stevens is going to drive out to the rural part of Massachusetts and just scream for a couple of hours. maybe in Duxbury.
Oh, that'd be great! I'd love to see him.
You won't be there.
Anyways, Tyler, what were you guys saying?
Okay, I was going to say, assuming they lose tonight in Houston, that gives them that ties the record for most consecutive losses. That's 26. Is that the
26? Yes,
26 to tie the record.
Yep,
they're at 26 right now. I think they tied it already, didn't they?
Oh, I believe they're at 25.
They're at 25. Okay, I'll take your word.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they go to tie the record tonight in Houston, which there's no way they win that game.
No
Houston's
chance.
still playing basketball, so they're going to try to get the W. But then they have a day off and then play the Pistons at home, who have fallen out of playoff contention and are also not a very good team. Do they will they try to play extra hard to not go in the history books of the worst consecutive?
Question: is Josh Smith still taking ill-advised
Or
three-pointers?
will he? That's the same question as is Josh Smith still breathing? Same answer.
Is Brendan Jennings still taking ill-advised
Is
three-pointers?
he still breathing?
Whoever thought it was a good idea to put those two in the same team together?
With
I'll
Andre
tell you,
Drummond.
Joe Dumars. He of the two phones picture.
I liken Joe Dumars to one of the guys on like ESPN's message boards that come up with like ridiculous scenarios and lineups.
I liken
playing two power forwards and a center in the same lineup.
I liken Joe Dumars to a 5-year-old who likes to talk in two phones at the same time. Just who happens to be a great basketball player 20 years ago.
Question: who's a worse GM, Joe Dumars or Isaiah Thomas?
Isaiah Thomas.
Oh.
It's not even close. And you heard what I just said about Joe
Sounds
Dumars.
like a segment for a future podcast. Be sure to listen in to Worst GM Ever debate.
Oh, I'm excited.
The answer is Isaiah.
You could expand that on the line.
Spoiler.
All right,
Isaiah Thomas.
guys. I think it's time to move on to our final segment of the day. I'm sorry, John, for stealing.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
All right, we're just gonna jump into Player of the Week.
Yes.
Baby G, who you got?
I have Kevin Durant scored 51 once this week. I think he scored 42 in a loss to Dallas. I know he's the best player in the NBA. I'm not exactly going outside the box, but the guy just scores and does it efficiently, does it on fast breaks, threes. He's varied his game incredibly well, and it's incredible to me that anyone's even able to hold him at this point. He's just automatic. He can shoot over anyone.
Well, Gavin, they do it with their hands.
The man's hungry.
accurate.
The man's hungry, but the question is, will he be eaten at the end
I
of the
think
season?
the only thing I worry about with Kevin Durant is when he wins the MVP. Does that give LeBron a little mental edge if they potentially compete in the finals? LeBron's the one who gets to be pissed now. Kevin Durant can't say, "Oh, well, I've been second all my life, so I can wear."
Here's an interesting point to bring up to that. When Derrick Rose won the MVP a few years ago, LeBron proceeded to destroy
Eviscerate
him
Well,
in the.
He was also the least deserving MVP of the last 20 years.
Yeah, because their strategy in that series was let Derrick Rose shoot 3-pointers in clutch time, and that worked out pretty well for Miami.
Ben Gordon should have been shooting.
All right.
Shout out to Ben.
Not on the team anymore.
Anyways, Tyler, who's your player of the week?
My player of the week is Anthony Davis.
The Brow.
Yeah, the Browns
Good
set the Pelicans
choice.
off for a 4-game win streak that include wins over the Clippers, the Nets, who maybe in the beginning of the season not so impressive now, post all
Or New Jersey Nets.
and the Heat. A big game against the Heat. He put up 30 points and I believe 11 rebounds. Oh yeah, by the way, double-double in each one of these games, which isn't a surprise for him anymore. He's a double-double machine. It's a surprise when he doesn't get one at this point. He's my player of the week.
He has more double-digit categories than eyebrows.
And that's
Thanks, Gavin. It's an
Quite
interesting stat.
statistic. And to Matthew Tonis.
All right,
Round us out here.
my player of the week. He hasn't put up the gaudy numbers that your two players of the week have. But he did lead his team to a win over the Oklahoma City Thunder on Tuesday.
fooled my player.
That is Dirk Nowitzki, everyone's favorite German. Dirk scored 32 and pulled down 10 rebounds in their overtime win over Oklahoma City. Then he only scored 10 and 8 in a game against Brooklyn, an overtime game against a Brooklyn team that is really trying to make a playoff push right now, trying to get positioning to maybe win a first-round game. And on Friday night, he scored 21 and pulled down 6 rebounds against the Denver Nuggets. Not the guy, he hasn't put up the pure stats, but he is the leader of a team that's making a playoff push right now. Right now, they're on the outside looking in on Phoenix. They're right now tied. I believe they're in the they're tied for 8th/9th at this point. But he is the leader of a team that's making a playoff push down the stretch.
And as time goes on, we will see just how close this Western Conference Finals race is going to get even more with Memphis playing pivotal games, actually against the Suns.
Yes.
That could potentially, or that will lead to whoever owns the tiebreaker in that series. And the Grizzlies also, and the Mavs also playing tough teams. We'll see how that turns out. And I think this is a great chance to say farewell to the humble listeners.
Thanks for hanging out, scrubs.
Thanks for listening to our banter. And hopefully you'll be here next time on the Bench Mob. Any final messages, guys?
Oh, yeah. Be sure to comment on your thoughts about some of the segments we've talked about and maybe give us ideas for things to talk about in the future. We're open for suggestions.
Remember, this is practice. We talk in practice here.
Also, check out our other podcasts featured on Fireside Podcast playlist. I think The Lounge, featuring myself and one Gavin Shaw.
This ain't a game. This is the Bench Mob.
Let's do it.
See you
and
later,
with that,
scrubs.
we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.